to tell us about, this will be a good introduction about your background. Tell us about the first time you came across a Jew.
First of all, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. But what I appreciate the most is having the opportunity to be a part of this film and to meet some amazing people, especially Rav Shalom and everyone in the Assad movement. I love you all more than I can express in words. And if I may, just very briefly, when I was approached to be part of this film, and they told me originally I was supposed to narrate it, I said, no way, I'm not Israeli. I'm not an Israeli voice. I couldn't do that. But then I understood the reasoning, and I was more than happy and honored if that would incentivize more people, especially in the Arab world, to watch the film. Now to your question. I grew up, as many of you know, I grew up in Lebanon. I'm half Lebanese because my mom is from the Bekaa Valley, Shia, and my father is from Damascus, and he's a Sunni. If they married, that says that they are secular, and they sent us to a French Catholic school in Lebanon. Religion was irrelevant in our life. The only thing the Shia, the Sunnis, and the Christians in my upbringing agreed on is their hatred of the Jews and the Israelis and the Zionists, and I deliberately say these three terms because they are used interchangeably. It is not true that it's only against, the hatred is only against the Zionists. So it's only in my mid-20s that by chance I moved to France and I landed in the Jewish quarter. I knew that my accommodation was in the Jewish quarter. I didn't know that it was 200 meters far from one of the biggest synagogues in Europe. And I thought it's like the Jewish quarter in Damascus, where I worked in my 20s, and that was free of Jews. In Strasbourg, it was filled with Jews. And the first time I saw Jews was in a grocery store when I went shopping on the first day across the street, and I didn't connect the dots. It had the same ingredients I would need, the same spices. I thought, fitting. And when I saw 4 religious Jews with sideburns, I had a panic attack. And I'm fearless, I thought. That was my first and last panic attack. The embarrassment I felt when I looked in the mirror after I dropped my stuff, ran up to the 3rd floor, locked my bedroom door, although nobody even looked at me. The embarrassment I felt made me think, what on earth? And why? Well, I realized later it was the first time in my life I was sharing the same space with a Jew, the enemy. And why was the Jew the enemy? I understood that everything I knew about Israel and the Jews, I learned from the one and only Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. He told us everything, often quoting Haaretz. Yeah, because he was our source. He had to get his information somewhere. And that was it. That opened my eyes. It was a process. It did not happen overnight. I had to do my due diligence and detox. So that was my first encounter with the Jews. I have to tell you something that amuses the Israelis. I realized years later that when I returned to the store and I told the man, because I had to explain myself, and I told him I lied. I forgot my purse. The man had left, we were alone. He asked me where I'm from. I told him it was my first day. I'm half Syrian, half Lebanese. He understood what happened. And he allowed me to save my face. He was nice, helped me with my bags. And years later, I realized that moment, that first encounter, changed my life, because that man turned me from an enemy to an ally through kindness. I didn't know that immediately, but had he behaved differently, my life would have been different.
He was Jewish.
Yeah, of course. It was a kosher store. That's why I found all the ingredients I needed.
So you mentioned in the movie that you have a TikTok channel in particular and other social media platforms called Arabs Ask, and on TikTok it's mostly Arab following. And these are people who don't hide their names, who speak to you openly on TikTok. And so one of the things you've said that you've heard a lot about is people out there wanting Israel to do things, whether it's take down Hezbollah or other things. And how does this fit in with this indoctrination that you were just talking about having so much hatred towards Jews?
I'm older than I look. Back during my teenage, we didn't have social media. That is the answer. Today's situation is completely different. It's not back like in the days where we had a few TV channels and we were restricted to the narrative the state wanted us to learn. Nowadays, even if YouTube channels are censored, did you know that Wikipedia is not allowed in Turkey, today's secular Turkey? They cannot, no matter how hard they try, stop teenagers from using VPN. They find ways. And the Israeli narrative is no longer omitted from the existence of the Arabs. This is why we see a shift. When I started my activism on social media, that was after October 7th. Prior to that, I was a dinosaur on social media, and that's the way my son describes it. I knew nothing. But I realized that there is a machine with a massive funding spreading misinformation, Al Jazeera, for example, and our only chance to try and debunk or try to work against this incitement was through social media. Because it's a platform for free, I can say whatever I want. And we started working, I started working with a team, with Open Door Media, a company that Raphael Shore, a media company that Raphael Shore founded. It wasn't easy, and TikTok in particular, after months of experience, is the most anti-Semitic platform. I made a video, to give you an example, with UN Watch Hillel Neuer, asking him, because he studied international law, to explain what's the difference in 1 minute between a hostage and a prisoner, because Hamas insists that those they took are prisoners, not hostages. And he explained objectively, and TikTok removed it because I was spreading nudity. So we gave up on TikTok, and only later, recently during the war in Lebanon, I wanted to know, are the Lebanese thinking the same way I used to think when I was a teenager? The Israelis are attacking us and Hezbollah are heroes, they're saving us. But how could I know if all my friends and family members blocked me? I tried again with TikTok. And I posted videos in Arabic without English subtitles. I did not want my Zionist and Israeli supporters to tune in and cheer me up. I wanted Arabs to watch, wearing my Magen David and talking about peace with Israel. And I expected insults, but at least we're like, if the effect is a small dent in the wall, I'll take it. And I was surprised, because they agreed. They know the war is not between Israel and Lebanon, the war is between Israel and Hezbollah. This is why Israel targeted only the regions of Hezbollah and Hezbollah members. It was almost surgical. It was brilliant. And the Lebanese understood. And now, with this massive plot twist in Syria, I started posting about the situation, and I was surprised that many more Syrians are pro-Israel, pro-peace with Israel, and this is not, I'm surprised that they spoke up, but I'm not surprised that they are fed up with the acts of resistance. Because remember, we learned all those parties, proxies, organizations are invested in the liberation of the poor Palestinians. But we don't buy it because we know how these regimes and proxies and organizations treat their own people. So give me a break. Don't tell me you're doing it for the sake of the Palestinians. That is why the response was positive.
Okay, so let's talk about the plot twist. We're seeing now in the past days a few dozen killed, right, in the Tigris region. The Alawite supporters of Assad are coming up to rise against the rebels, or whatever we call them now. Can you make sense of it all? Do you think that there's, what's the way out of this? Is this a good thing that's happened there? We're seeing also burning of Christmas trees, so that's not too promising. And what's the feeling for you, as someone who's from there, and also about people that you're in touch with over there?
I rarely cry. You can tell that I have thick skin. I grew up in the Middle East and survived wars. But upon the fall of Assad, it literally broke my heart that some of my Israeli friends reached out, almost mourning the situation. Oh my God, Assad fell. It's more destabilizing to the region. And I thought, oh, I didn't see that coming. He deserves, Assad deserves the trophy of the monster of the century. What we know so far is the tip of the iceberg. I have friends in Europe who can't read 1984, George Orwell's 1984. The Syrians live it. Of course, I was beyond happy. It was a very, very nice surprise. And I understand that people are concerned. Of course you have to be. And I'm happy, and I invited my Israeli friends to reach out to the Syrians and congratulate them. And some of them mistook it, misunderstood. They thought I'm endorsing Islamists. No, Al-Jolani did not become John Travolta overnight. We don't trust former members of ISIS and Qaeda. No way. Nevertheless, they did what the US and Israel could not do, the world could not do, and should not do. If Israel had killed Assad, he would have become a hero. It had to be done by Syrians, and these were the ones available on the ground. And they did it beautifully, because they did not slaughter people on their way, although some of them are former members, maybe active members, of ISIS and Qaeda. So what happened is good. And bear in mind, we're in Israel. The Israelis eliminated every Hezbollah member who sneezed in Syria and Lebanon lately. Yet, they allowed the rebels to advance. They took Aleppo, and then Hama, and then Homs, and then they arrived in Damascus. And Assad ran away like a mouse. So they gave us a gift. Give them that. They promised it's a transitional period, and by March, they will hand over to an elected leadership. If they don't, if it's taqiyya, and I heard every possible opinion in this week in Israel, okay, let it be. Then they're bluffing, okay. Then it would require a military action. Who's gonna take them out? This is the superpower of Jolani. He can be in the same place, at the same time, with all his jihadist friends. So that can be solved if it gets to that point. Of course, we are seeing in Hama a Christmas tree burned. They were arrested immediately, and a new tree was built. What's happening on the Syrian coast is normal. It is horrific, but it is normal. We talk about Al-Assad regime as if it was him and Maher al-Assad running the country. They had tens of thousands, and there is an estimation that 200,000 people were there involved in operating this drug cartel, this regime, this dictatorship, whatever you want to call it, a nightmare. And these people tortured, tormented the Syrians. So I can understand if in a village somebody was dragged, lynched, it shouldn't happen, but who could stop it? If it happens to someone who's responsible for killing or for the disappearance of thousands, this is inevitable. Give them time. Besides, they lack political maturity, which is understandable after 54 years of Assad, son and father. I am optimistic. The same way I came to Israel and I said, and I told people who were in doubt, Israel will prevail. And they told me, how could you know? I know it, I trust it, I believe it. קוראים לזה אמונה, if you want. I knew it in my heart. If you think about it mathematically, Israel is dramatically outnumbered. Against all odds, Israel is here and winning big time. Hezbollah was humiliated in Lebanon. And the axis of resistance is incredibly weakened. It's a matter of time until they're over. And they committed suicide on the axis of resistance, committed suicide on October 7th. And in the same way, I'm sure that what's happening in Syria is promising. We are witnessing events that will reshape the Middle East.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. But thank you for clarifying. Those are really, really important points that I think are lost in all the headlines, things burning and airports.
If I may add something, I think, and understandably, the Israelis are traumatized after what happened on October 7th. And some of them asked me, how do they know that the Syrians won't behave like the Gazans on October 7th? And I realized that there is a misconception. The Israelis think that the Lebanese and the Syrians are like the Gazans. In Lebanon and Syria, children do not attend UNRWA schools. There is no obsession with Israel. There is animosity, unrealistic. Of course, there are some who think because we are born and we owe the Palestinians something. You have, if you're a moral person, you have to support the Palestinians. So there are still many who think Israel should go away and then everything will be fine. But people don't behave like the Gazans. And some Arabs insist, and that was intentional, they think that we have one cause, one Arab cause, the Palestinian cause is ours. So some insist you cannot separate the two. Of course, we need to separate the two. You can't because we're all one, we're all alike, and I challenge them. Syrians, I tell them, show me one video where a Syrian woman learned that her son died and she went rejoicing like a maniac on the street. Show me one. This only happens in the Palestinian pockets, or to be accurate, the Arabs of Palestine. This is the mentality here because it's a cult of death. And the supporters of Hezbollah do that. Otherwise, no sane Lebanese or Syrian think, okay, if you kill my first son, kill the others, and if you kill them all, I'll give birth to more, and I will sacrifice them for the cause. So it's very important to make this distinction.
Thank you for that. You mentioned the drug cartel from Assad. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting is, first of all, why is it not being spoken about more? Captagon is a $40 billion or something, $5.7 billion, which is a quarter of Syria's GDP, and it's 40% of Hezbollah's entire finances. So this is something that I understand is happening now, but why isn't the international community, can we do more to get rid of this? I think Michael Oren talks about this, depriving the terrorists of their oxygen being their money, and it's coming from these drugs. And you've talked about this, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Why isn't more done about it? Not because the world doesn't know about it. The CIA, there are existing reports. The world knows it, the UN knows it, but they are busy. They're obsessed with Israel. They're preoccupied. So everybody else on planet Earth can suffer because they need to solve the Palestinian issue. That is why. Now, Hezbollah's weakened. This is why I'm very happy with what happened in Syria. Because Naim Qassem, the new Secretary General, at least the one who survived so far, when he went out after the ceasefire and he promised the Lebanese or their supporters, we're going to give so much US dollars for this, so much US dollars for that, so much da-na-na-na. He's not just like distributing money. He did not see this plot twist coming. The tap is closed, you're not paying anybody. And now, surprisingly, in Lebanese media, not only the Lebanese are telling them, you are mad, this is madness, you destroyed the country. For 11 months, we've been telling you, stop provoking the Israelis. Now, Shia, who were fond of Hezbollah, probably who used to work for Hezbollah, are upset, and now they're becoming vocal. It was the beginning of the end on October 7th. Just watch them fall. Because where are they going to pay their people from? The salaries in US dollars. So this is very important. And the Captagon industry wasn't only poisoning the Lebanese, the Arabs, it was being sold everywhere in Europe, including in my son's school in Germany. This is unbelievable. And the world did nothing about it. The most fascinating fact about the Captagon is that when you ask the religious, devoted jihadists, dude, isn't that haram? Like, it's totally unkosher. This is dirty money. I think they justified the same way some justified the attack on October 7th. Well, even if they kill babies, these are Jewish babies. They're gonna grow up to go and serve in the IDF. Even if the Captagon is lethal and poisonous, we are killing our enemies in the Gulf. Arabs who betrayed us, went behind our backs and made peace with Israel and the West, and we know what the jihadists think of the West.
Which is, of course, deeply ironic because we also know that Hamas terrorists also took Captagon, so they could also take it.
To boost their monstrosity.
Yeah.
It's always crazy with these organizations. Once, Hassan Nasrallah was given a speech and it was broadcasted in the Dahi, in the southern suburb of Beirut. And he was talking about the West, what it's gonna do to the Israelis, how it's gonna destroy America, and I don't know what, blah, blah, blah. And the thousands cheering for him. And there was a European journalist, brilliant, he zoomed out. And behind the crowd cheering for Hassan Nasrallah were boxes with US aid on them. They depend on the US to feed their own people, and he wants to destroy the West. So when I speak to Americans, legislators say, what can we do? Conditioned aid?
Okay, I'm going to ask 2 more questions, even though I have about 30 more. We'll move to the axis of resistance in Yemen. So probably while you were sitting here, the head of the World Health Organization, and his name is horrible to pronounce, so I'm not even going to try, posted on Twitter, X, sorry, that...
X-Twitter. That's a solution.
Twitter. That he was at Sana'a airport while there were Israeli strikes, but he's safe. And as you can imagine, the vitriol that came after that, what are the Israelis doing? Killing humanitarian heads and killing, you know. So tell us a little bit about, and also I'd love to know, were you here in the center of the country? Did you experience a Houthi siren? What was that like?
I have. Because of the Houthis, they sent rockets to Israel. I'm coming from Jerusalem on the train, and it was very important to make it on time. I was 1 hour late for my interview because of the Houthis, because I couldn't exit the train station. I couldn't, my GPS wasn't working, so I couldn't issue an exit ticket.
Did your GPS tell you were back home in Lebanon?
That happened, or in Cairo. I couldn't exit, so because of the Houthis, I was late to the interview. So they were complaining, I'm like, talk to the Houthis, talk to the Houthis. I heard the sirens. The Houthis, I think, are the least of our problems because they're also the Saudis' problems and the Americans, and they do disrupt global economy or trade. So I'm not really worried about them. But this concept of Israel deliberately targeting the UN, the UNIFIL. So I had a friend, he lives in Amsterdam, Dutch officer, former officer, now he's retired, and he spent many, many, many years in southern Lebanon. He's such a sweet guy, I know his family, he knows mine. And he speaks in a Lebanese dialect, southern Lebanese dialect, If you're not looking at him, you would think he's Lebanese. Unbelievable. Genius, brilliant guy. After October 7th, I realized that my friend is an anti-Semite, like nobody's business. Unbelievable. He makes statements that are absurd. He's super intelligent. He created a company, he refused to sell it to Apple. And he speaks so many languages. And I asked him several times, because at least he's intellectually, no, maybe not. But the way he debates, he doesn't go back to talking to me privately. If you're gonna attack me publicly, then this discussion belongs in the public. And I always ask him, what did you do, Thomas, with this attitude? What did you do? Like, if you know that Hezbollah is doing something illegal, did you document it? Did you report it? Because from all I'm seeing, you would support them, you would justify it, you would help them, and he never answers. And all his friends who come to his aid, I go to their profiles, they're all ex-UNIFIL. Interesting, and I always ask them, what did you feel about Hezbollah? So they are willing to say anything except what would implicate them in, like, what would be problematic for what they've been doing in Lebanon. It's unbelievable. So they are complicit. They know that. And even in Lebanon, I don't know what happened in Yemen, but even in Lebanon, the UNIFIL they were not doing their job. You cannot tell me, and I've seen an exhibition, many posts of Hezbollah were very, very close to the UNIFIL. They must have known about it. Why the world believes that Israel deliberately targets humanitarian organizations or the World Kitchen, I don't know what. The same way in 1996, I was watching the news, and on the news it was reported in Ghana that an Israeli airstrike targeted children and women in a UN shelter. This is the narrative I heard. I couldn't care less. Like, why would they do it? Why would this happen? I didn't care, and I don't think that many around the world care to know the Israeli version of events.
So on that point, knowing that people don't care, my last question is, it's something I actually ask all activists or quote-unquote influencers and everyone who's putting themselves out there, because I find it incredibly inspiring and for me, incredibly difficult to understand. I just think that when you've got so many layers of pain here, right? Being here, being part of this story, whether it's the hostages, which so many ups and downs every day. We think there's going to be a miracle, a Hanukkah miracle, we pray for that. Whether it's the soldiers, we're seeing faces every single day die, or whether it's horrible images coming out of Gaza as well, of Palestinian babies. And then on top of that, you have this just deluge of hate all the time online, and you get it in your inbox, and you get it DM'd, and it's sliding into your DMs on every level. And how do you just keep going on and doing this fight, fighting this fight every day? How do you do it? I'm utter awe of you.
When I decided to do this publicly, my son asked me, why are you doing this to me? And I told him, I'm doing this for you. I spared him the misery of the Middle East, and I thought, he is my responsibility. So he lives safely in a sterile environment. But I do have a moral obligation, like everyone in this world, to help the others who are not my children, to help people like me when I was a child, hiding when we had wars, whether internally in Lebanon or with Israel. Children don't have a choice. I owe it to the peoples of the Middle East, because I do identify with all of them. Some Israelis think you belong to us, you are one of us, so what do you care about the Lebanese and the Syrians? That's wrong. This sounds like when the Arabs tell me you're betraying us, you're all my people. And these children are our obligation. And when we ignore them, this will come back to bite. Hi, Dan. I see a very old friend. I'm very happy to see him. I recognize him because of the beard. He looks like Theodor Herzl, and Herzl is one of my favorite people. I think that on that note, people think I'm betraying them, especially the Palestinians. And I want to end, before you open it for the crowd, with this. We owe it to the children of Gaza to liberate the Arabs of Palestine from the Palestinian cause. I don't know how we're going to do this. I don't have a magic wand. But it is time for moral clarity, no more gray zones. You're either on the side of human civilization, Western values, the universal morality that stems from Judaism, or you join a cult of death. So we have to make a choice, and we need to save those who want to be saved among the Arabs of Palestine.
Any questions from the audience?